Chevrolet has built some incredible cars over the decades, but they've also created some absolutely bizarre vehicles that make you question what was happening in the design studios. Today, I'm exploring the 10 weirdest Chevrolets ever produced, from engineering disasters to questionable styling choices that somehow made it to production. These aren't just bad cars, they're genuinely strange automotive experiments that defy explanation. 10. 1974 to 1987 Chevrolet Chevette. Starting our countdown at number 10 is the Chevrolet Chevette. Chevy's attempt at building a subcompact economy car that somehow lasted 14 years despite being terrible at almost everything. What makes the Chevette strange isn't any single design element. It's how GM managed to create a car so fundamentally mediocre in every possible way. The Chevette was basically a rebadged Opel Kadett City that GM imported from Brazil and other international markets. This sounds reasonable until you realize GM took a perfectly decent European economy car and somehow made it worse for the American market. The build quality was inconsistent, the interior materials felt like they belonged in a children's toy, and the 1.6-liter four-cylinder engine produced an anemic 70 horsepower on a good day. What made the Chevette truly strange was how long it survived. From 1974 to 1987, GM sold over 2.8 million of these things despite consistently terrible reviews and customer complaints. The car had virtually no redeeming qualities. It wasn't particularly reliable, fuel-efficient, comfortable, or even cheap compared to better alternatives from Honda and Toyota. 9. 1971-1977 Chevrolet Vega. At number 9 is the Chevrolet Vega, a car so fundamentally flawed it became a case study in how not to engineer an automobile. The Vega wasn't strange because of its appearance. It actually looked quite attractive for an early 70s economy car. What made it bizarre was the incredible number of engineering disasters GM managed to pack into one vehicle. The most notorious problem was the aluminum engine block with iron cylinder liners. This seemed like advanced technology in 1970, but GM's execution was catastrophically bad. The aluminum block would warp, the cylinder liners would shift, and the engine would literally self-destruct, often before 50,000 miles. GM knew about these problems during development but released the car anyway. What made the Vega truly strange was GM's response to these problems. Instead of fixing the fundamental issues, they just kept building more Vegas and hoping customers wouldn't notice. When the problems became impossible to ignore, GM introduced the Durabuilt engine package, essentially the same flawed engine with a longer warranty that didn't actually solve anything. 8. 1990-1996 Chevrolet Lumina APV. Number 8 goes to the Chevrolet Lumina APV, part of GM's dustbuster minivan trio that looked like someone had designed a vehicle using only a ruler, and a complete misunderstanding of aerodynamics. The APV, all-purpose vehicle, was strange from every possible angle, starting with its bizarre proportions and ending with its inexplicable design details. The most immediately strange aspect was the APV's profile. GM designers created a vehicle that looked like a spaceship that had crash-landed and been converted into transportation. The windshield was positioned at such an extreme angle that it extended well into what should have been the roof area. This created bizarre interior proportions and made the van look like it was constantly falling forward. The interior was equally strange. Despite the dramatic windshield angle, the APV didn't actually have more interior space than conventional minivans. The dashboard was positioned so far forward that normal-sized drivers felt like they were sitting in the back seat. What made the APV truly bizarre was how GM marketed it. They positioned these vans as futuristic family transportation that would make conventional minivans look outdated. 7. 1975 to 1980 Chevrolet Monza. At number 7 is the Chevrolet Monza, a car that started as a promising sporty compact but became strange through a series of increasingly bizarre engineering decisions. The Monza was based on the Vega platform, which should have been the first warning sign, but GM managed to make it even weirder than its troubled predecessor. The strangest aspect of the Monza was how GM positioned it. They marketed it as a sophisticated, European-style sports coupe that would compete with cars like the BMW 2002. In reality, the Monza was just a Vega with different bodywork and most of the same fundamental problems. The aluminum engine was still prone to catastrophic failure, and the build quality remained inconsistent at best. What made the Monza truly bizarre was the engine bay packaging. GM designed the car around their small four-cylinder engines, but then decided to offer V8 options without redesigning the engine compartment. Installing a V8 in a Monza required partially disassembling the engine, lowering it into the bay, then reassembling it in place. Routine maintenance like changing spark plugs required removing the motor mount and lifting the engine. 6. 1982-1988 Chevrolet Celebrity. Number 6 is the Chevrolet Celebrity. A car so aggressively mediocre it becomes strange through sheer determination to avoid having any distinctive characteristics whatsoever. The Celebrity was GM's attempt to create the perfect middle-of-the-road family sedan, and they succeeded so completely that the result became bizarre. What made the Celebrity strange was how GM managed to eliminate every possible interesting feature while somehow making the car less appealing than the sum of its parts. The exterior design looked like it had been created by a committee whose only instruction was, make it look like a car. Every line was generic, every proportion was average, and every detail was forgettable. The interior was equally bizarre in its commitment to mediocrity. GM used materials that weren't quite cheap enough to be obviously low quality, but weren't nice enough to feel premium. The seat design was neither comfortable nor supportive. What made the Celebrity truly strange was its success. Despite having no distinguishing features and being genuinely unremarkable in every measurable way, it became one of America's best-selling cars in the mid-1980s. GM sold over 1.6 million Celebrities, proving that sometimes customers actually wanted a car with no personality. 5. 1971-1973 Chevrolet Corvette. At number 5 is a Corvette entry that might surprise people. The 1971-1973 C3 Corvette that featured some of the strangest engineering decisions in sports car history. While the early C3 Corvettes from 1968 to 1970 are rightfully celebrated, the early 70s models became bizarre through GM's panicked response to changing regulations. What made these Corvettes strange wasn't their appearance, which remained stunning, but the engineering compromises GM made to meet new federal requirements. The 1971 models lost significant power due to lower compression ratios designed for unleaded fuel, but GM didn't redesign the exhaust or fuel systems to compensate. The result was sports cars that looked fast but performed like economy cars. The strangest aspect was the fiber optic light monitoring system GM introduced in 1971. This was genuinely advanced technology. Fiber optic cables connected each exterior light to indicators on the dashboard, allowing drivers to know immediately if a bulb had burned out. The system worked perfectly and was actually innovative. 4. 1999-2005 Chevrolet Tracker. Number 4 goes to the Chevrolet Tracker, which was strange primarily because it wasn't actually a Chevrolet at all. The Tracker was a rebadged Suzuki Vitara that GM imported and sold through Chevrolet dealers as part of a partnership that made very little sense for anyone involved. What made the Tracker bizarre was how obviously it was a Suzuki. GM made minimal effort to disguise the vehicle's origins. They literally just changed the badges and called it a day. The interior still featured Suzuki switchgear, the engine was obviously Suzuki designed, and even the owner's manual referenced Suzuki part numbers. The strangest aspect was how the Tracker fit into Chevrolet's lineup. GM positioned it as a compact SUV that would compete with vehicles like the Honda CR-V, but the Tracker was actually a capable off-road vehicle that was terrible at everything else. What made the Tracker truly bizarre was the convertible version. GM took a small SUV that was already compromised for on-road use and removed the roof, creating a vehicle that was even less practical while adding complexity and cost. The convertible Tracker looked like someone had accidentally designed a Jeep Wrangler competitor without understanding why people bought Jeep Wranglers times 3. 1984-1988 Chevrolet Corvette. At number 3 is another Corvette entry, the C4 generation that introduced digital instrumentation so advanced it was completely unusable. The early C4 Corvette represented GM's attempt to create a high-tech sports car that would establish American technological leadership. Instead, they created a car with some of the most bizarre human interface decisions in automotive history. The strangest aspect was the digital instrument cluster that replaced traditional analog gauges with a complex LCD display. This sounds progressive until you realize GM's execution was catastrophically bad. The digital speedometer updated so slowly that it was impossible to maintain steady speeds. The tachometer had such poor resolution that precise engine speed monitoring became impossible. The fuel gauge was so inaccurate that experienced C4 owners learned to ignore it entirely. What made this truly bizarre was how GM marketed the digital instrumentation as a premium feature. They positioned it as advanced technology that made the Corvette more sophisticated than European competitors. In reality, every other sports car manufacturer continued using analog gauges because they worked better and were easier to read quickly. 1986-1991 Chevrolet Beretta. Number 2 goes to the Chevrolet Beretta, a car that became strange through GM's complete inability to decide what it was supposed to be. The Beretta started as a sporty compact coupe, but evolved into one of the most confused automotive products ever created. The strangest aspect of the Beretta was how GM positioned it. They marketed it as a sophisticated European-style sports coupe that would appeal to young professionals. The reality was a car built on the same platform as the Citation and Cavalier, with styling that looked sporty, but engineering that prioritized cost-cutting over performance. What made the Beretta truly bizarre was the GTU package. GM created what they called a racing homologation special, based on their IMSA racing program. The strangest Beretta variant was the convertible prototype that GM showed at auto shows. They spent considerable resources developing a drop-top version of a car that already struggled to justify its existence, then canceled the project when they realized nobody wanted a convertible Beretta. 1974 to 1977 Chevrolet Cosworth Vega. Taking the top spot is the Chevrolet Cosworth Vega, perhaps the strangest production car in American automotive history. GM took their most problematic vehicle platform and somehow convinced legendary British engine builder Cosworth to create a high-performance version. The result was a car so bizarre it defies logical explanation. The Cosworth Vega featured a genuine Cosworth-designed aluminum 4-cylinder engine with dual overhead cams, electronic fuel injection, and advanced metallurgy. This was legitimate racing technology adapted for street use. The strange part was installing this sophisticated engine in a Vega body that retained all the fundamental problems that made regular Vegas terrible. What made the Cosworth Vega truly bizarre was the engineering contradictions. GM specified genuine Cosworth engine technology but paired it with the same terrible transmission, suspension, and electrical systems that plague standard Vegas. The result was a car with a $6,000 engine installed in a $3,000 chassis, assuming the chassis was worth that much. What made this truly strange was the production process. GM shipped Vega bodies to England where Cosworth installed the engines, then shipped the completed cars back to America. This created quality control nightmares and astronomical costs for a car based on GM's most problematic platform. And there you have it. The 10 strangest cars Chevrolet ever produced. What's the weirdest Chevrolet you've ever encountered? Drop a comment below and let me know which strange Chevy I should have included or ranked higher. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.